All right, welcome to Buddy Book Club. I'm Dylan, here with my comrade, Keith. What's up, buddy?
Hello.
We're breaking down some bestsellers, and this week we'll be discussing All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque. Yeah, that's what we're going to go with. If you'd like to recommend a book for us to read or reach out to us about any past episodes, you can visit our website, buddybookclub.com, or slide into our DMs on Twitter or Instagram, Buddy Book Club Podcast. You can listen to us on iTunes and Spotify, so please download and subscribe. Okay, Keith. So this is part of our kind of like back to school session. This is probably going to be the last one we do before we dive back into the fantasy realm. But this is supposed to be the highest grade level that we've read, and it definitely is. But this and The Alchemist back to back, I feel like is kind of tough because they're both so damn serious. The Alchemist was metaphorical perhaps, or it was all a drug-induced frenzy. We go into that, which is kind of life lesson-y, to this, which is a pretty detailed first-person description of what it's like to be a German soldier during World War I, or really any soldier.
This is a German book, and we know the Germans aren't necessarily known for their levity. They're usually pretty serious. And then the last book was a Brazilian book, and we know there's a certain amount of Germans for some reason in Brazil also. So we just know these are two serious books. That's what it comes down to.
There used to be one of those shows on Discovery Channel, which was great. It was about these Israeli commandos that would go into South America to hunt down Nazi war criminals.
That was on the Disney Channel?
No, Discovery Channel.
Oh, I thought you were saying Disney. I was like, what the?
Yeah, so it was pretty wild. It was like reenactments of these things that happened in the 70s and 80s, but it was pretty cool. They had to confirm this is a Nazi. And then because they didn't have jurisdiction, they'd go in, murder them, and then get out. You know, it wasn't
fictional or
no,
is this
it's
real?
true. This is true story.
Oh shit. Yeah. Oh wow. Okay, that's kind of cool.
But you can't bring them back to Israel to like stand trial. It's like, no, you go in there, you murder them, and you get out. It was wild. That's completely different than All Quiet on the Western Front. All Quiet on the Western Front has nothing to do with Nazis. This is World War I. This is pre-Nazi. And it's just our main character, Paul, and his story about him and his comrades as, you know, they're kind of going through the war. But just the story is pretty much war is hell and fuck the man. What do you have for stock up?
Post-work clothes? Stock up. So, you know, when you get back, I mean, obviously we're working from home now, so it's a little different, but you get back, and back in the day, I'd get my khakis off, throw the meshy shorts on, you know, you take off your tie or whatever you were wearing back there, your hipster gear. But yeah, there's just nothing like getting into those sweats. But how about Paul coming back home, and he's wearing his full military attire, and some officer starts dressing him down, being like, how dare you not salute me, blah, 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 blah. Like a guy that's never seen the front, hasn't seen a minute of wartime, shitting on him. I would not be able to take that. I just wouldn't be able to do it. I'd slug that guy right in the face, and that the best case scenario is you get arrested, right? And you don't go back to the front.
Well, they did discuss a little bit how they would send you to, I can't remember what they called it, like the island or the fortress, that's what it was called, which is basically a World War I prison, which, yes, it's not the front, but it's equally terrible. I mean, people will die of diseases and whatnot. Additionally, the point that he makes for the fortress thing is that you then lose your purpose. Yeah, you're not in the war, but then like, what are you doing? You're like doing nothing.
Surviving.
Yeah, alive. There's so much camaraderie and brotherhood that, you know, he doesn't want to leave those guys anyways. But I agree with you. That whole part was like so infuriating. Fuck this guy. And you know that that's definitely a thing.
Oh, yeah. For sure. It still happens today, I'm sure. The whole point is like no one was asking him war questions after he got back either once he took all the gear off. So it was just like, all right, I can just chill and not be hounded by these fucking people that have never seen what I've seen.
It also must be wild when you're daily carrying around. It's what people do now for fun. Oh, I put on this weighted vest and I wear it all day. It's like so I can stay strong. When I take it off, I feel 30 pounds lighter. It's like, yeah, well, that's what these soldiers are doing every day. Like he's got, you know, extra ammo, food, like med kit, his weapon, all of this stuff. Those helmets must weigh 10 pounds. And to just all of a sudden one day you go home and you take it all off, it'd be wild. Probably feel like you could fly.
Yeah, and you know these dudes are completely underfed. They're probably at like 5'7", like $120 maybe, you know, like they're carrying around this. They're not eggs and chicken type guys, you know, that they are today.
They're not Ubermensch, yeah.
I just remember Jim Tomey, during the steroid era where everyone was taking steroids.
Baseball, yep.
Yeah. And they're like, Jim Tomey, he's never been accused of anything. And they asked him, so what's the deal? You're hitting all these home runs. Like, yeah, I just work on a farm and I eat like eggs a lot and chicken. And they're like, all right, case closed. He's just always had that face and that body. You're like, yeah, that makes sense.
His neck didn't grow 6 inches in the course of like 2 years.
Yeah, he just looked like this big oaf like the whole time. No offense, Jim Tomey. I know he's a big fan of the program, so I don't want to, it's not an insult. It's a compliment.
My first stock up is card games for 3 people. So there's really not many card games out there. I mean, let me know, you or listeners out there, let me know if I'm mistaken here. But, you can play like Rummy. You can play cribbage. It's kind of difficult. But from my understanding, there's not a lot of card games for 3 people. But the game Skat, which is referred to several times throughout this book, is actually the national card game of Germany and is built for 3 people. It's also a trick-based game. I'm not sure if you're familiar with trick-based games. Are you?
No.
Okay, so they play like euchre out here, like in the Midwest, really. It's kind of like a turn-based game. There's usually some sort of trump suit. There's an auction system usually. The cards have different hierarchies. It's super fun. And I read up on this game a little bit, and I was like, shit, I should actually learn this. I love a good card game.
By trick base, you mean they're not like performing tricks, right? You just mean they're like it's like a system to it, like an auction to it or something?
Yes, they're not performing tricks and they're not turning tricks.
I was like, magic? They're just cards are disappearing out of their hands. Like, hey, part of the game, Bo. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. David Blaine's out there in the Somme, the Battle of the Somme, just making cards disappear. No, it's not like that. Trick is, I can't really explain it. It's going to take too long because I'm also just not well versed in how to explain these things. I'm maybe the worst person that explains games. People always get really angry at me, so I'm not going to do it here. Yeah, not like turn-based. I'm not even going to try. You know what? I'm starting to go into it.
I get it. I got it. Yeah, it just means complicated. Go on.
Yeah, it means complicated. They actually are typically complicated. 45s is a good trick-based game.
On the other hand, people always say I explain rules that only help myself, so we'd be a good combination.
Yeah, so I'm all in on Skat. I want to get involved. So
yeah, it's a good name for a game too. I like it.
Yeah, it is. There's also a different, an American Skat game. That's
categories. Yeah.
No, it's a card game. It's a little more simplistic. Yeah. It's pretty much you just try to get 3 cards to equal 31 or some 21 or something like that. Not blackjack. Don't play that game with me.
What's the game where you throw down cards? It's kind of like war, but it's basically you go around in a circle. You throw down a card. If you get the jack's the best card, an ace.
Slapjack.
4 slapjack. Great game.
you just keep throwing down cards until there's a jack, and then you slap, and you get the whole pile.
No, this is different. It's...
Oh, you're talking about Spit.
Spit. No, that's not Spit. We're going to go through every game.
Yeah, I was about to say, we just changed the podcast into just us talking about card games.
Egyptian rat screw. That's what it's called. Have you heard of that before? Am I just making that up?
I prefer Persian rat screw.
I mean, they're not that great at screwing or rats. All right, I'll be here all week.
What does that even mean? All right. What do you got next for stock up?
Stock up war swag. And by swag, I mean confidence.
Okay.
This book's obviously about the horrificness and awfulness of war, but if there is a silver lining, it's just the fact that these dudes had the most swagger of all time after this. They're picking up girls, not even speaking their language. They're going back. They're basically telling teachers to fuck off. They just have a whole different vibe after the war because they don't give a shit about anything. They talk about how materialism used to be important to them, and now they're just like, why do I even care about that? What does it matter anymore? And, it's not good probably, but it's also not... It's not bad. They're looking at things in a much different light. And actually, a lot of this book actually reminded me of Fight Club. They're explaining the whole how you grow up and you're told all these things and materialism and patriotism and all these things are kind of ingrained in you. And then you get to a situation that you realize, none of that really matters.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the convenience store guy getting a gun in his face. And he said, this is the best day of his life. All food's going to taste better. Everything's going to be better. And that's kind of like the whole situation with them, the whole war, is they're appreciating things that are shitty just because they just went through the worst thing they could possibly go through.
I agree to some degree. I think there's, unfortunately, because of this war and the PTSD stuff, which it's like the concussions in NFL. It's the PTSD stuff. It's like, how
You mean when they get shell shock in NFL?
Yeah, exactly. It's just how was this not identified as a serious mental problem before, I don't know, 20 years ago. Like, what the heck was going on in the world that people were just like, oh, look at this pansy? Well, like, everyone's dealing with it. Although some of those moments might exist where, you know, you get to like lay up and look at the sky and not feel like you're going to get murdered and be like, oh, that's a really great day. There's also probably a level of like cynicism, and that comes through in the book, you know, of humanity and just life in itself and what's it all for kind of thing, that unfortunately I feel like clouds over how good that burger is going to taste after you come back.
My whole point is like, once you don't care about anything, you're able to, I forget the quote in Fight Club, but there's like literally a quote about that. It's like, once you're given up on everything, you can then start living kind of thing. And they kind of had that vibe. Obviously, that was the small silver lining I got from it. But yeah, pretty much everything else was the worst possible case scenario.
In terms of your initial point about the swag, it's also when they get the new recruits in, the new recruits look at them like, holy smokes, these guys are total badasses, which they are. But it reminded me actually a lot of Band of Brothers. Are you familiar with that HBO miniseries?
After watching this or reading this, I was like, I need to commit, because I keep on watching it and I kind of get zoned out after the first episode. Yeah. But you've said so many times that it's like the best docu or whatever series you've seen, so I just need to do it. Yeah,
definitely is. I would also suggest, considering we're a book podcast, that you should just read the book or listen to the book. It's a short book. Stephen A. Ambrose, who normally does like more epic books, wrote the book on it, and it's really, really good. The book is almost word for word the show. They did such a good job of it. With that being said, there is an episode called The Replacements, which is about the replacements that come in after D-Day. And they're the same age, maybe a year younger or whatever, as the guys who just went through D-Day. But they look at these guys like they're movie stars. Holy shit, they got campaign badges on. They've, got different medals and whatnot. They've obviously been a little hardened by war. And it's like, oh my God, these are badasses. And even in All Quiet on the Western Front, when they're talking about it, they try to school up the young guys about the sounds the different mortars make and the bombs make, and like how to identify different caliber weapons and whatnot.
Right.
And they're just looking at these guys like they're superheroes. And so there's definitely that level of swag too. My next stock up is pooping in public.
What's the stock price at right now?
Stock price is pretty low. I mean, although they do have those new public bathrooms that are like single. Have you ever seen those? You flick the light and it makes the windows opaque. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, I have seen that. I would never trust that. I would rather have the lights off.
There is a hilarious TikTok thing or something about some guy who goes into a restaurant that has one of these, like some posh restaurant, and just like doesn't realize the situation and just poops. Well, everyone can see, and it's like it must be fake because it's too perfect. Either way, stock up.
Have you ever pooped in public?
What do you mean, like gone into a Home Depot and like pooped in a fake toilet?
No, just out in the public, not I'll tell my buddy's story and see if you have another similar. So we're at a party. This is in college, and it's a big house party going on. We got flip cup going on. We got everything going on. Bathroom situation isn't great. I mean, that's fact of the matter. And my buddy keeps saying, like, I really need to take a shit. I'm like, just game up. Like, we'll close the door. No one will fucking know. It's fine. Just game up. He's like, nah. I'm like, come on. He comes back 10 minutes later, goes to the bathroom. I'm like, you get it done? He's like, yeah. I just went outside, took a shit on the grass outside. Just took a shit out there. And we're like, wait, what? So he just literally went to the yard and took a shit in the yard and then came in and wiped.
Straight out of Me, Myself, and Irene. But also, I have a huge rule, which is you never let the cheeks touch until the wiping has occurred. I think that's pretty standard rule, isn't it?
Never let the cheeks touch. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like,
he must have had a good clean RG. I don't know.
You can't trust that.
I'm sure it was terrible, but the most savage thing is he literally was shitting out. If anyone walked out and just saw him, they'd be like, "What the fuck is going on?"
No, I did have a friend who liked to poop outside, let's say, in teenage years, like when you're 12 to 14. If there's any women listening, I apologize. Men, especially young men, are just disgusting creatures. The movie Bridesmaids, when the mom's like, I have a 12 and 14-year-old. I'm so happy to get away. Like, I cracked a towel in half the other day. That is the most accurate representation of having young boys. So basically this friend liked to poop outside. Long story short, he pooped in the woods and wiped his butt with poison sumac. And was too scared to tell his mom because we were like 12 or 13. And so like spent the next week pretty much just like with his legs, sleeping with his legs in the air and like a fan at the end of the bed, like a terrible situation. This same friend, I also, when our bathroom was getting renovated, we had another bathroom, but I told him we didn't, and I made him poop under my porch. So, boys do stupid things.
Yeah, you should be an asshole.
But in this book, pooping in public, it actually happens fairly early on, and they pretty much just all get crates, go out in the woods in this beautiful field, and they all just sit on these crates, have a laugh, and poop together out in the field. And I thought, how amazing is that? Because I work in a corporate setting, and maybe not anymore after this podcast, but I work in a corporate setting. When I first started, I used to have a lot of fear of going in there and pooping while other people were in the bathroom. I'm the kind of person that I didn't poop in school until I was in high school, and I found a perfect bathroom that usually no one was in. Other than that, I used to, like in middle school and elementary school, I'd say I was sick. So the idea that these guys are so free, and they even say in there, like, what's there to be shameful? Because I'm like, oh my God, I'd be so ashamed. And they're like, what's there to be shameful? Like, as I'm thinking it, the next line's like, what's there to be shameful about? It's just as normal as eating or drinking or any of the other normal bodily function. I'm like, you're so right. I wish I could embrace that. What about you?
Well, I mean, the difference is like they just see their buddy's intestines the other day, so it's not really, I think the same thing with like doctors and things like that. They have way less shame of a lot of those things just because they're like, it's a human body, who cares, Whereas I think if you're in a corporate setting, and as I wrote in the Buddy Book Club blog, is if it's a Taco Tuesday and then you have to look your coworker in the eyes after coming up a stall, it's just a tough thing to do. But I wish I had that same freedom that they have as well. But I wouldn't be willing to go to war for it. So
no.
There's that.
Well, maybe you just have to go to like corporate war for it, because I think I've told this story maybe even on here before about when the CFO came into the office, and who we never see, and is just like the biggest swinging dick. Obviously, he's CEO. He's a CEO of the company, a 5,000 person company or something. Walks into the communal bathroom. Hey guys, how are you? Oh hey, a couple people washing their hands. I'm like, what's going on? He immediately goes into salt. Doesn't like wait for people. I would normally wait for everyone to leave before kind of starting. Yeah. He just walks into the bathroom and unleashes the most unheard of airplane diarrhea, because he's been flying back and forth places. Just airplane diarrhea sprayed all over the wall. I can only assume, but based on the sound that it made. And I was like, holy shit, that was insane. And he's one of those...
But that's more of an alpha thing, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
he's like,
sure.
I have to do this. He probably took some sort of substance in order to do that.
But he was also like lightning quick. Like he went in there, did this shit, and by the time I'd finished washing my hands, he came back out. Like he looked us in the eyes.
Doesn't wash his hands. He just looks right at you. That's right.
I don't know.
Then shakes your hand. You shake it.
Yeah, it tells me, it's like, shake it.
Yeah. Classic.
Yeah, but either way, pooping in public, stock up. Good for these guys. I'm gonna start carrying a crate around and drop my drawers in Falmouth Center. Okay, let's get into stock down. What do you have?
This one I think was pretty obvious. Teachers, stock down. Cantorek, fuck that dude. Literally.
I thought we were going to get into that for like pick your character, like don't pick your character, but yeah, okay. Go on.
Yeah, he is just the absolute fucking worst. Just a government mouthpiece, convincing a bunch of young high school kids to join the army, basically. It's just disgusting. The teacher's job, even in today, the only thing that they should be doing is basically teaching them new things and telling them to question everything. That's it. That's their only job. They should never be influencing them in any way. It should say, hey, you like addition? Here's in subtraction. Here's multiplication. That's the new thing I'm opening up to you. You can now understand that. Now start questioning how that works. You think Goosebumps is the best book series? Fuck you. Try Harry Potter.
Oh, that's influence.
They're saying now you determine if you like it or not. Yeah. Like I'm introducing you to different things along the way. They should never be telling you, here's the right thing to do. And I think our teachers growing up did a great job of this. They introduced religion, government, all these different things, and they said, Here's why people like it. Here's why people don't like it. That's it. Like you guys can determine that. This Cantorak dude, just the fucking worst.
Interesting, because I think in anything, just on a human level, you're gonna have influence. I mean, that's just the way it is. Even if you're a teacher and you're supposed to kind of let people pick their own destiny. You know, their own story is a choose your own adventure novel. You're leading them towards something. And I think that part's hard. But I totally agree with you, this Cantorac thing. But he's a great character for this because he personifies this idea of like blind patriotism and also the idea of romanticizing war. He calls them
Iron Youth.
Yeah, the Iron Youth. He was like, "Oh, you and the guys, you're the Iron Youth. You know, you're gonna bring glory back to the fatherland and all this stuff." When patriotism, I respect it. I don't find myself to be super patriotic personally. I respect people that are, but to just be blindly patriotic and just say like, oh, I'm going to war because the country's at war is tough for me. And I love war novels. I love war books. I'm obsessed with war podcasts. I mean, if you're listening to us, turn us off, go listen to Dan Carlin. He's way better. but like Dan Carlin does an amazing job, especially with World War One. It's called Blueprint for Armageddon. Oh my God, is that such an amazing series? Like I get goosebumps just thinking about it. And this book ties a lot into that for sure. But the idea of just saying, oh, you know, I'm going to do this for the country. Yeah, everything's great until you actually get your boots on the ground and you realize you're just a small cog in this giant machine and no one gives a fuck about you. And I'm cynical on this, obviously. So, you know, if people feel otherwise, I'm sorry. But there are just causes out there. World War II, I feel like, was a just cause for sure. And America's been just kind of getting the tail end of both of these world wars. They had the best gig in the whole thing. They came in, cleaned it up, and took all the glory.
I mean, yeah, USA was crushing it back in the day at the wars.
I mean, especially after World War I, when the whole infrastructure of Europe was nil and the United States could just build all the manufacturing. You know, they're just this giant island really, and they could just build all the manufacturing, become the greatest world power. And then World War II comes along, they sweep in for the last couple of years, clean everything up and take all the glory. Okay, you know, hey, I respect it. You know, don't hate the play, hate the game. I feel it.
I think World War One they swept in. I would say World War II they were pretty important.
Well, I mean, in terms of body count,
we're still fucking under Nazi rule. If it weren't for the boys, us in Canada coming to France and UK, you know, but UK was getting their shit kicked in.
Truthfully, after Operation Barbarossa, when Hitler decided to go and fight Stalin and the boys, that was his biggest mistake because it was all ticking clock. Like Hitler was going to go down at some point after that. US came in at the right time, in my opinion. But we definitely made it so it didn't last as long. That's for sure. But let's get back to the point here with the Cantorac stuff. You know, this idea of blind patriotism, it continued on. I think things have kind of quieted down a bit now that everyone's kind of into their own bullshit with social media and whatnot. Like there's no real nations anymore. I feel like it'd be hard if there was actually
I think Russia and China still have that.
Yeah, there's definitely some blind patriotism, and it brings in the whole media aspect. But the media aspect is just a giant telescope almost of what Cantorac is, right? Because he's their one person who they look forward to for information, and he's telling them what the right thing is, which is what people do all day long.
At least we now have more voices that we can listen. You know, it's not just one like they didn't have the other side of it.
Unfortunately, more often now you have to seek out the other side, and a lot of people don't want to do that. But
that's true.
Okay, so my stock down is the LEIGH reading level. So we used that to kind of figure out what kind of books we wanted to, you know, The Giver. Okay, yeah, that's like, I read it in like 6th grade maybe. It's like, okay, LEIGH says it's like a 4th grade book. I'd be like, okay, interesting. Like, this looks pretty heavy for a 4th grade book, but whatever. You know, I read it in 6th grade. LEIGH's calling me an idiot. This book, All Quiet on the Western Front, is like a, what would you say was like a 6th grade reading level?
Yeah, I think it was 4th grade somehow. I don't know how that is possible.
So fuck these LEIGH people, because if I read this to a 4th grader, they would probably have nightmares and also learn a lot of interesting new words. Some of them swear words, other words like gangrene and amputation, things that probably aren't super right for someone that's 10 years old. I think there's something that's wrong with that process in terms of, okay, the words, like you're going to understand most of the words. Yeah, you're going to understand most of the words, but are you going to understand the point? Because you and I are 35 years old, and we don't understand the point of half the books we read. So fuck Lexile. I can read the words, but will I understand the point? Do we understand what's happening? Like what the conversation really is?
I don't even like having these labels on the books, to be honest with you, because your boy was not a good reader. I'm barely a good reader now, but I mean, back in the day, you know, that hurt me a little bit. I guess that's kind of like getting trophies now in sports.
Participation trophies?
Yeah, so I can't really argue that because I don't really care for those either. If someone made it competitive, I would have been much more into reading. Someone's like, you won't fucking read that book. Your classmates are reading it. I'd be like, all right, that's it. You know, yeah. I still can't read them, but I'm gonna, do something about it.
Maybe I was like a cynic at a young age because I remember I read a book on Balto. You remember that dog that like saved some people or whatever?
Lassie?
He's in the well. No, that's a different one. But my dad was like, you did such a good job. Like, you're reading this book that's supposed to be read at for a third grader. And I was like, I don't know. This book seemed pretty stupid. Is third graders just dumb or like is this thing? And it turns out, no, it was stupid. It's probably just all a marketing scheme like everything else. What else do you have for Stock Down?
Kind of touched on this a little bit already, but Stock Down surviving war. By the end of the book, it was pretty depressing. He was basically like, the best thing that could possibly happen in the war, it sounds like, is just an instant death. Everything else was the worst possible thing. You get either shot and you're just left on the battlefield for like days on end, suffering while you die. You get shot and then you get carried to a medic thing and then you suffer in there for days until you die. Or you get trained off and you suffer until you die. Or they cut off your limbs and you're just basically stuck with your own mind and the PTSD that you're going to be carrying for the rest of your life.
I also love how they're like, oh, the prosthetics are really good these days. And I'm thinking, what do you mean these days? It's like 1915? Like,
yeah,
how good are the
prosthetics?
Like, wow, good for them.
And then they just have like the doctors that are like doing experiments on them and shit. I'll be like, oh my God. And then you have to come back and people are like, oh man, we're about to win this war. You have like 2 legs cut off. You're just sitting there and you're just like, I'm going to fucking kill this person. That's, like it's... Yeah. So I'd much rather just die quick and painless than have to go through this. It's basically what I took away from this book.
Oh, for sure. Just kill me there. I mean, so at the end of the book, Paul dies. And the way that it's done, and they say that like he died with a smile on his face pretty much. And it's because...
I thought he had like the Mona Lisa smile is what I imagined.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. And... it's because everything's lost to him. Like he doesn't want to go back to this world. Like talk about the PTSD stuff. He doesn't feel connected with that world anymore. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but they took a bunch of wanderlust, interested in the world 18-year-olds, introduced them to war, and made them not interested in anything else, like anything at all, ever again. You'll never be the same. So what's the point living this like shitty life with, all of this trauma when you could just die in a fucking mustard gas hole and call it a day? So it's terribly sad, but prophetic about war for sure, or at least, war at the time. And other war books, I'm just going to continue with that, but because, we're talking about the surgeries and stuff at the time, just all seems so grisly. Like, fuck. Yeah. And even the doctor, when he's like, well, where's my friend? My friend's dying. It's like, oh, which bed's your friend in? And he's like, I don't know. The guy's like, oh, it's bed 23, the amputated leg. He's like, I don't know who that is. I've amputated 5 legs today. It's like, holy shit. I'm thinking about the Civil War battlefields, which is obviously,
I know. I was thinking medieval shows where they just go around the battlefield and just like stick knives in people to make sure they're dead. Like, but they're just sitting out there in the battlefield, like dying for that days on end.
That wasn't medieval. That was actually like fairly recent. They've been doing that. I mean, like World War II.
I guess that's true too.
I mean, fuck, they're probably doing that in Vietnam and shit like that. But 2 really good books. Jeff Shura is The Killer Angels and Gods and Generals, which is about the Civil War, specifically Killer Angels about Gettysburg. Gods and Generals is written by his son, which is like a prequel, if you will, Chancellorsville and another battle. But, they talk about the disease and the amputations, and they're just like legit sawing off limbs. There's just a pile of limbs outside of the war tent, the surgery tent, and it's like, holy fucking shit. Like and you connect this, like you said, with medieval times, but this is 150 years ago. You know, this isn't that long ago. It's like, holy shit, like what would lead someone to do that? And I think it's the idea that we have so much media and stories on this stuff these days that it'd be harder for people, where then it was almost seemed like, you know, you're from a small farm town and you hear, we're going to war. It's just like, oh, great adventure. Like, let's go on this wonderful adventure, and you do it. So definitely not, turns out. Turns out it's not.
You read this type of book and you're like, oh yeah, if I were in war, a lot of the, especially like Vietnam and even Afghanistan, these wars today, there's a lot of people that come back there like drug addicts because of it. It's like, yeah, I would just take whatever is given. Like, I don't even care. You know, it's just like, I'm going to die anyways. Might as well have like a good time. Smoke some weed, or, I know heroin was big in Vietnam. Would you ever blame him for that?
I don't blame anybody for anything after something like that. Cause you know, those are boots you cannot walk a mile in. It's as simple as that. You know, like you cannot put yourself in that mind frame whatsoever. And also, like what you're talking about with just like the war itself, is like the World War I trench warfare and the rats they're talking about in this book. Oh my God, the rats, man. Like, I'll stock down rats. Like and their stock's way low, but
wow, it's low. Yeah, big
like
stocks
way low. But holy shit, like talking about rats waking you up to them like nibbling on your face to get some food you have is like, holy shit. It's even hard to visualize. I actually started watching the 1979 version of this, like the movie that came out. It was like a made-for-TV movie. And the only thing that really stuck with me was they did a good job of showing like a pile of rats. And I was just like, that's so many fucking rats. Like, it's hard when you're reading the book. They're like, oh, there's rats everywhere, this, that, and the other thing. But then you see 40 rats in a hole, like crawling over each other. It's the most disgusting thing. And I think these guys had to deal with it on like a day in, day out basis. Like, the idea in this book that rats attacked and killed a couple dogs and a couple cats should show you how fucked up the rat situation was. Like, they were able to band together. They're like, yo, rat homies, let's go fuck up this dog and gnaw it to death. What the fuck is happening? I'm out. No, thank you. War is hell. That sounds terrible. My last stock down is The Enemy. The enemy itself. So stocks are usually up in the idea of hating the enemy, right?
Oh, okay. Enemy hatred, stock down.
Someone says enemy, I'm like, yeah, fuck that guy. You know, Bowser, fuck that guy. He's Mario's enemy. Hate him. Well, Bowser has to go home and live a life too. You know, Bowser might not be so far from Mario. Yeah, Mario yearns after Princess Peach, but so does Bowser. You know, Bowser goes home, he has his supper, he shits on his same toilet, maybe a little bit bigger than Mario's. It's like People magazine. When you open it up, it's like, oh, celebrities are just like us. Well, the enemy is just like you in so many more ways. And they show that in this book for sure, where, you know, he's talking about the guy he kills. He's like, this guy looks like a farmer. You know, he looks like just like we look. He's just some guy who got pulled into this bullshit like I did, and now I have to stab him to death in the middle of this hole and watch him gurgle as he dies. Like, that's fucking terrible.
Gurgle sounds like a German name.
Gurgle. There's good stories that come out of World War I of, I think it was like Christmas Eve one year, and the German lines, and I don't know whether it was French or UK people, what English folks or whatnot, but they basically had like a ceasefire and crossed no man's land and traded food, sang together and whatnot. They might have even played like a soccer game. Like, I think they played like a game of soccer in no man's land. And then it was like, all right, cool. And the next day they're back to killing each other. And it's just one more thing that just makes you hate the man and the system. Let's not hate the individual pieces. Let's hate the machine that's pulling them.
Rage Against the Machine. There you go.
Don't get me wrong, I like this book a lot. It's just really something that puts us in the middle of nowhere that I can just make fun of because it's the ether. It doesn't really exist.
Do we want to read a bad book next? Is that what you want? Like one that we can... We'll just pull up a Reese Witherspoon fucking bestseller.
Yeah, that's what I need.
We'll read that
that's
next.
Exactly what I need.
Those are our best episodes, let's be honest. The ones where we just go in and just start yelling at things.
I actually saw someone recently who was, you know, they're trying to start a genuine conversation with me, which I should have appreciated. But I was like, what are you reading? And she was like, oh, I've just loved the Reese Witherspoon book club. I've been crushing through those books.
Her body has not been found since, weirdly enough.
I just look her in the face and go, I fucking hate those books.
Daisy Jones and the Six is good.
That's exactly what I said. I didn't even notice. Caroline like looks over at me like, what the fuck did you just say? And that's why we all need good women in our lives, because I realized how much of a dick I was being, and I was like, no, but Daisy Jones and the Six really saved it. You know, she was great. Oh God, I felt like such a dick.
You gotta come out strong.
Yeah. All right, what do you got for favorite scene in this one?
It wasn't really a scene, but I just liked it when that little bitch Canerick got enlisted into the army and had to get a little taste of his own medicine. But there's only like one or two bright spots in this whole book. It's Canerick getting enlisted, and then them wooing the French girls.
What about pooping in the woods?
I mean, the camaraderie in general, I think that would be under that whole umbrella, but that wouldn't be a scene. That's just the boys are being boys. We appreciate that, but it was just, that's the only thing they could do to survive. A couple good scenes, a couple just scenes where the boys, you know, getting laid before they get killed in the war, and this little bitch Canerick having to go to the war. And I assumed he died. I looked it up. I don't know if he did, though. I hope he did. I hope he actually lived. And I hope he, you know, got a couple of limbs cut off. Fuck that guy.
Oh, yeah. Fuck that guy for sure. I love the actual war stuff. When they do that first counterattack against the French, there's not a lot of fighting in this, right?
It's just them just feeling like pounded with
like artillery, which is probably accurate to trench warfare. Most of the time you're just getting pounded by artillery, and then sometimes you go over the top. But the counterattack was part of the rat scene, and then they do the counterattack, and they haven't eaten in like a week, so they're like grabbing everything they can before they can like have to head back. So it had a mix of all of the feelings where it was like, holy shit, this thing sucks, like Battle of the Bulge, you know, Bastogne kind of vibes, into this like counterattack where there's like, you know, pew pew pew, people fighting, war, crazy, and then them getting all this food and running back, and then like the thrill of it all. You know, they like say they sat there for an hour, like they had so much food they haven't eaten in like a week, and they just sat there for an hour just like, what the fuck just happened, before they're like, all right, cool, like let's get some of that corned beef. So especially because that happened early on, set up the characters really well, set up what this war was really like, and then the rest of it is more of a mental exercise as to how the heck are these people going to get out of this mentally. And turns out none of them do, so tough. Well, I guess we can do a quick pick your character. Who's your boy?
I like Cat. I didn't realize he was older, but I guess he was like an older, like 40-year-old guy, and he kind of lived a life, but it's just his sixth sense for finding food. I fucking loved that part. I just like that he was just like, I'll be back, and he just came back with like, and found food somehow. He just like sniffed it out. I appreciated that. And he seemed just like a good guy. Yeah,
I mean, I'm with you. Stanislaw Kaczynski, my boy. Everyone needs one of these guys in their crew. I couldn't imagine if this crew was without him, you know, because there's so few ups that all of a sudden, you know, this guy's like, hey, I saw a couple geese over there. Like, let's go get these geese. It's like, yeah, cool, I'm down. Yeah. Or like he shows up with a couple packs of cigarettes or some cigars. It's like, thank God. I couldn't imagine if I was in war and ran out of cigarettes, and then like one of my buddies showed up with a pack of cigarettes. I'd be over the moon. I love the bartering. I'll give you a couple of this for a couple of that. I love that aspects of war. It really brings us down to our human nature.
They didn't write about it either, but my assumption is at night they would go out and just scavenge, right? Like all the dead people, they'd go and be like, find their cigarettes, right?
Well, I don't think you're necessarily like risking going into no man's land for some ciggies.
I mean, when you need a cigarette, kid. Because they were risking lives to do random shit. Like, one of the funniest parts is when they're getting bombed and they're cooking and they're like, we got to finish this shit up.
Oh, yeah.
They're just getting shelled and they're like, all right, well, we're almost done, so it's okay.
You're like, shit, they caught on to us. They see the smoke. It's like, well, all right, these pigs need 30 more minutes. It's like, based quicker. What'd you love about All Quiet on the Western Front?
I appreciated that this was like when men were men. You know, you got these 18-year-old kids living the most awful lives. The book wasn't about complaining. It was just like, this is our reality. This is how fucking bad shit is. But I go out and I'm like, I don't want a cigar because it's going to make my clothes smell. And tomorrow I'm going to have a slightly sore throat. These guys are just ripping cigars just to get by. I didn't even know they smoked cigars, by the way, back in the day. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, I thought that was like a high class thing.
They had it all. Snuff, dip.
They're smoking the cigars and cigarettes just to get like the smell of blood of their friends, you know, out of their clothes. I'm like complaining about shit. You know what I mean? Like that's how like they're just men, and you read this book and you're like, Jesus Christ, I'm so lucky just to not have to do this. Sometimes people ask me even like why I like watching professional football, and besides the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've gambled on it over the years, it's really to feel bad about myself, because I look at these 20-year-old guys who are out there and not only like putting their bodies on the line, but
the stress. I watched that Patriots game with Mac Jones when he got taken out, and I'm just thinking this 24-year-old guy has to deal with not only his team, but also the media, all this bullshit. I couldn't imagine that. I have a conference call with like 30 people that I have to do, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is going to be terrible. Like, and this guy's dealing with a whole fan base and national media attention. And as a kid, he's a young guy. The male brain doesn't even cement itself till you're 25 years old. It's just wild to me.
And it's not like you do a presentation and all of a sudden like a 6'5", 255-pound guy's running at you that weren't expecting to be there. He's getting variables thrown at him. These guys are getting so many variables thrown at him. There's nothing they can do to
or someone after the presentation, I'm like, oh, is there any questions? And someone's like, yeah, why did you suck today?
Boo.
yeah, sorry. Someone's screaming, like chanting for my replacement in the background. Jesus. So similarly to this, it's like these guys, I can't do with how much they're able to endure. One of the things I loved was that like the names of the battles aren't included in this, in the book, because it's not important. He says they've been fighting for months over 100 yards of land. And that's the point. The point of this book isn't to be like, oh, okay, this is a firsthand experience of the Battle of the Somme or Verdansk or pick your any World War I battle. Like, that's not the point. The point is just this is a guy who's in somewhere in France with his buddies and they're fighting for their lives. That's the whole point of it, and I love that. It additionally, like, similarly is almost like connected, but we kind of talked about it, but there's no glorification of war or like heroism in the colloquial sense. Oh, there's heroism for sure in this book, but it's subtle heroism and it's foxhole heroism, kind of you're there for your buddy. And it's supposed to be this way because it's an anti-war book for sure, but it wasn't one of those war books where it's like gallantry and wow, what sacrifice, this thing and the other thing.
I mean, we do see a lot of war stuff, a lot of things that are like, oh, it's amazing, it's fun, and we like reading those and watching that type of stuff. But yeah, at the end of the day, this book did not hold back in any way. I also like the guy that cared more about the horses and the soldiers dying. I don't know if you remember the scene where the guy's like, the horses are kind of like whining off in the distance and like, in pain. And the guy's like, for the love of God, someone like put him out of their misery. He's like more upset than that, than like the hundreds of people that just died right in front of him.
That was one of the things that also made me realize about war, that it's a five senses, or however many senses we have. It's a five senses experience. Because the noises, the sounds must be incredible. They're talking about guys dying in no man's land. And it's just like you have to hear them for days out there and you can't do anything. They're just dying. And these horses, which are screaming. I mean, I told you I just got a puppy. I was watching the movie. Puppy was in his crate sleeping, and that's when that horse scene came up. And the puppy started freaking out. And I was like, I get it, dude. Like, these horses are just dying in this movie. It's terrible.
The other thing, too, I don't know if this reminded you a lot of Starship Troopers. Obviously, Starship Troopers is basically a satirical version of this, like a lot of what's going on in this. There's a point where the guy's like suffering, and then one of the guys goes over and like shoots him, and it reminded me of the scene. It's like, I'd expect every one of you to do the same thing for me, like when one of the troops gets pulled out of the squad and sniped. Yeah, it was pretty depressing though that this is actually real and the Starship Troopers is a made up thing.
No, I see that for sure. Or when they go to shoot the guy after he's been in the gas or whatnot, and the stretcher comes up and takes him away, it's like, well, that's too bad. He's going to suffer for a super long time as opposed to just dying here peacefully. So yeah. And the last thing I love about this book is these are events I'll never experience, thank God, but I felt like the writer did such a good job making you understand like the feeling that these guys are going through. Like, it was almost as good as a Dan Carlin podcast listening to this book. You actually get the understanding of why they feel that way based on this experience and the way it's written. Erich was a World War I veteran, so I assume he was able to take a lot of firsthand experience and firsthand feelings, and he was able to put them in this book really well. You got any other loves?
Just the last thing, I like the ending. I thought it was appropriate, that it was just like no fanfare, no heroic last stand. It was just, yep, and he died. It was just like a good ending to a depressing book.
And Paul came home and invented penicillin.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the matter-of-fact conversation about why a spade is a better weapon than your bayonet. Oh, yeah, it's heavier. Like, it'll cleave someone in half, and, like, it doesn't stick into the body so that you don't have to, like, while you're pulling it out, get stabbed in the back. It's like, holy fuck. And they said it in such a matter-of-fact way. It wasn't trying to scare someone. It was just like, yeah, it's just the way it is. Like, wow. the shit that people actually deal with while I'm eating popcorn and watching TV. Jesus Christ. What'd you hate?
It may have just been the audiobook, but I had a tough time separating all the side characters because they were like pronouncing the German names, and I was like, who? Like, what? When I went back through them, I was like, oh, now I get it. It's like actually this person or this person. But like at the time, I was like, wait, which one's that guy? So that was a little tough for me. Did you think the same thing?
Oh, you mean Himmelsthas and Bertnick and Dietring and Hammerak?
Yeah, he was pronouncing with the accents, and I was like, can I just get like a Bob? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, no, I definitely had a tough time being like, oh, this is the guy who wanted to be the forester, and this is the guy who wanted to be the theologian. That stuff was definitely tough, for sure. I agree with you there. And I guess maybe for my hates, they make it seem like if you eat suckling pig, you're going to shit yourself all night. And I just wanted for PSA, suckling pig is delicious, if not for the whole murdering a baby pig part. But yeah, it might be fatty. It's a quite unctuous meal for sure, but it's worth trying once in your life if you can get over the fact that you're killing a puppy pig. So,
okay, noted. Another hate from me was the subway to get back. The subway was how everyone got to and fro to the front. Seems like that would be like a main military place just to bomb or get rid of, right? I was like,
pretty straightforward.
Everyone goes through here? Like, why don't we attack this one place?
Well, I assume that's like outside of artillery range. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, I get that, but there's no like spies behind enemy lines or anything you can do there.
Yeah, good point. Plant a bomb. I mean, that's how World War I started in the first place. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. And then just lastly for me was, I thought it was one of those books where I reflect on it and I'm like, yeah, that's a great book. I think everyone should read it. But at times it definitely was drawn out and it was a little bit preachy, but I think that was important when you look back at it. Like, it's one of those books where there are certain books I look back and I was like, I liked it when I was reading, and then I look back, I'm like, oh, that book kind of sucked now that I think about it. This book, the opposite.
If you want to know how important it was, my last hate is the Nazis, because this was on their list of books to be burned by the Nazi regime. Yeah. So they didn't want their people reading this and actually learning something. Instead, they wanted the blind nationalism that this book was preaching against.
Right. Well, no government would want anyone to read this book, because it just basically is like, why the hell do you ever want to go to war? So it basically kills your whole draft initiative.
Do we have listener mail?
Yeah.
You've got mail.
Austin from Dallas, Texas. Let's say you have 6 months left on deployment, but they give you a month leave. Do you take it knowing how hard it is to go back just to come back, or do you ride it out and skip that month off? But also imagine that the war ends in like 4 weeks and you decided not to take that month break. What are you doing? Well, based off the book, obviously it sounded like Paul hated going back, but what would you do?
Coke and hookers. Yeah, take the month.
Yeah, I'm taking the month and punching the dude in the face, right? That's the fact of the matter. And they're releasing you from that jail, right? Once the war's over.
Probably, yeah. They'll figure it out. You'll be all right.
Yeah, coconut is good point. Yeah, you're right. Live it up for 1 month. Good point.
You're done anyways.
Right there.
Just do something crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't go home and set up your garden for the next year. Go do something wild.
That's his problem. He didn't really blow off steam very much. He needed to pick up some sort of habit, addiction or something while he went back.
All right, so we can cast the movie if we want. This was made into a movie in 1930. It won some Academy Award. It was adapted again in 1979 as a made-for-TV movie, which I actually started watching, and it's quite good, actually. It's not bad at all. And now it's going to be its third adaptation, this time in the hands of Netflix. It's being released this Friday, October 28th. I'm pretty sure it's in German. I think it's going to be a subtitled movie. I actually haven't watched the preview because I didn't want to spoil the book for myself. But yeah, I'm interested to see it. Considering it's German, I don't really have a ton of casting for it. I'm not like Michael Fassbender's character in Inglourious Bastards and know all the German cinema people.
I didn't cast any specific characters. I just chose 5 dudes that I think look German or are German. So I'll read you mine off. First off is who's actually in the new movie, Daniel Brühl. He's the guy from
Inglourious Bastards, the sniper. Yeah, he's great.
He speaks like 10 languages. He plays every nationality. Yeah, insane actor. Then I did Taron Egerton. He kind of looks like a German dude.
Yep.
And then I did Michael Fassbender, who can speak German.
Indeed he can, as was seen in Inglourious Bastards.
I did Tom Walaschika. He is actually German. He's a guy with no name or face, whatever, from Game of Thrones.
Well, if it's a W, it's pronounced as a V in the Germans.
Walaschika. Yeah, Tom Walaschika.
Okay.
He's German. And then lastly, Joel, who's Swedish, Joel Kinnaman, who's like, you recognize him. He's in The Informer, some Netflix show. Throw those 5 together. That's my all-star cast. Cast them over the fuck you want. They all speak English. They all are somewhat German.
All right, so next up, we're getting back into the bread and butter, some YA fantasy vibes with
right up our alley, Six of Crows by my girl LEIGH Bardugo. So yeah, should be a good one.
I'm excited. I can't wait to get into it. And until then, bye now.